Hi! This is part 1 of my review featuring Postcards from Avalidad. This is a near-future sci-fi horror campaign setting inspired by William S. Burroughs, David Cronenberg, William Gibson, and Clive Barker. The story is centered on Takeda Technologies, a Japanese corporation conducting research in genetics, cybernetics, augmented and virtual reality, and biotechnology. And it also contains a strong element of the supernatural. This campaign setting is quite system neutral, although it contains statistics related information for the role-playing games Asterisk Punk and Actual Fucking Monsters. If you're going to play this using another system, I recommend that system contains rules to handle sanity and horror. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. My only criticism is that the table of contents is located at the back of the book. This is quite counterintuitive in my opinion, because normally you open the book and you read the table of contents, and then using that table as reference or guide, you go to any section that you wish. But here you have to go to the back of the book and then you search for the right entry and then you go back to the pages that you went through, so it's quite counterintuitive as I mentioned. However, this book also contains an index. And neither the index nor the table of contents are hyperlinked, but you do have bookmarks. Despite that, everything is well organized and written. At the back of the book there is a note explaining that in order to enhance the foreign nature of the setting, some of the writing has been purposely left as if a foreigner or someone from an exotic location is telling you about Avalidad. The graphic design, the layout, the illustrations and the photographs are great to communicate that sense of the exotic, of the mysterious. And the font does a great job at communicating that as well. So overall, despite my criticisms, the quality is good. Now, let's talk about the contents. As I mentioned before, the story is centered on Takeda Technologies. They had a significant breakthrough by dealing with supernatural entities, whose leading representative in our world lives in disguise as a human millionaire. Hideo Kobayashi, head of a vast economic empire, furnished Takeda with future tech for reverse engineering in exchange for control over their business and the products of their research. Though Takeda accepted the deal and sold his soul to the devil in the process, he has managed to conceal some of the more ambitious projects from Kobayashi, at least until the story starts. In this campaign setting, characters are expected by default to be Zone Sec operatives or executives for Takeda Technologies, but other roles are obviously possible depending on the type of scenario you are planning. Though the scenario deals with technological achievements in genetics, biotechnology, cybernetics, and augmented reality, this is mainly a surreal and body horror experience. It's definitely not hard sci-fi. Most of the technological breakthroughs made by Takeda Technologies and its parent company Kobayashi Corporation were not accomplished because of regular scientific research, but through dealings with demonic entities for which time and space can be bent. Not that they can travel through time and space quite at will, they aren't that powerful, but they can sometimes access parallel universes. While some of the influences for this campaign setting are definitely cyberpunk, others are pre-cyberpunk. But since the nightmarish gadgets you find depicted in Cronenberg's movies or described in Burroughs' books are definitely techno-organic, cyber isn't the best way to describe them at all. They all have a biotechnological feel. So taking into consideration the sources, the genre we are talking about here is future noir. That's why this is Postcards from Avalidad and not emails from Avalidad. It's somewhat of an old-fashioned setting. You could also call this subgenre as tech-noir. Don't worry if you don't have a firm grasp upon this subgenre. In this book you have different sources of inspiration, movies and TV shows that can get you into this sort of future noir or tech-noir vibe. In this fictional account, biotech and cybertech aren't everyday things like they would most likely be in other science fiction role-playing scenarios. Hisashi Takeda CEO of Takeda Technologies, struck a deal with Hideo Kobayashi and obtained a few future technology prototypes, reverse engineered and tested in secret labs. Most people have no idea about what's happening. Those that do have an idea work for either Takeda or Kobayashi. Beyond that, science and technology haven't made that much more progress globally. Let's talk about Avalidad. It was previously known as Interzone or just Zone. It is a large district built inside Tangiers, Morocco. Later, it vastly outgrew the city's own borders under the influence of the Kobayashi Corporation. There's no strict relation to the Tangiers International Zone, which existed between 1926 and 1956. The new city first took its name because construction started immediately after the joint administration of the territory was extinguished. Later, the city was rebranded as Avalidad, which the Berbers used when speaking about that strange city. In this alternate reality, instead of reintegrating the international zone territory back into Tangiers, the Moroccan state made a deal with an international conglomerate of several corporations interested in investing in northern Africa. The futuristic metropolis was built in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and accordingly divided into subzones, managed by different companies. A libertarian laissez-faire paradise for exploitation and experimentation. Of course, everybody knew their objective was to use cheap labor, avoid taxes, and, primarily, to be able to do research without interference from outside agencies. What most people do not know is that behind Avalidad there was one man, or at least something that looks like a man, Hideo Kobayashi. There are several reasons this place can be perceived as otherworldly. First and foremost, Interzone, as it was known before, doesn't exist anymore and never existed in the way here described. The game master can feel free to populate it with whomever and whatever he finds useful, ideally without breaking the suspension of disbelief. Avalidad is a futuristic city built in northern Africa, so it can be as dystopian or utopian as you want it to be. Quite a lot of money was invested in its construction. There are high-tech facilities everywhere, and most corporate employees are well-paid foreigners. But what about the locals? Those who do the cleaning and maintenance, the ones who are responsible for menial jobs. They could undoubtedly live outside the city, but, for security reasons, whoever signs to work with an Avalidad corporation is prohibited from living without authorization. This doesn't apply to everybody. The player characters will, most likely, be allowed to leave the city as frequently as they wish. And even if the timeline isn't actually defined, the city was built recently, as far as cities go. And though there was an enormous investment, the contractors cut corners to speed up the construction. No matter that Avalidad has existed for little more than 100 years, the places which aren't constantly maintained quickly turned into decayed, brutalist urban environments. In the decades after the city was erected, even some well-paid foreigners fell through the cracks. They work in high-stress jobs, living in an almost lawless town, where they can consume every illicit substance and indulge in any depraved desire imaginable. Kobayashi and the other corps maintain strict control around all of their facilities and buildings, and there's also Zone Sec, a unified security force in charge of enforcing the norms in the whole city and working as secret state police. Finally, most corporations are researching high-tech, so any kind of prototype and new gadgets are available here before they appear anywhere else. And what is so different about Avalidad? Quite a lot, even if most of it isn't universally known. For instance, recently, Burroughs Tech, a Takeda subsidiary, has marketed a revolutionary entertainment system called GamePod, which is basically an advanced gaming console. By making use of augmented reality glasses or contact lenses and earbuds, GamePod creates the perfect illusion of a virtual environment where anything can happen. It has been used chiefly for games and other virtual experiences, like traveling without leaving your own home, though it can also be used for educational or training purposes. Most people in Avalidad know that the GamePod is closer to an animal than to a machine, but it was marketed as a regular console to avoid reminding customers that it is in fact a living thing. Now, the commercial version of GamePod is a biotechnological device with the external look of a regular console but with a soft, fleshy touch. There is also another version of the GamePod available. It is more bio-organic in design, slightly disgusting to look at, and much more effective than the commercial one. Among other reasons for its greater effectiveness, the Bio GamePod, known as Neuropod, is connected to the user through a port located in the spine. The enhanced version of the GamePod, as of yet only available in the city, is also used for entertainment, gaming and education. This enhanced version of the GamePod can also be used to simulate or replicate the voyage through planes of existence that some of Kobayashi's allied demons, known as machinatores, can do. The Biocomputer is another of those devices that lead to a double existence inside and outside of Avalidad. There's a commercial product being sold, an unrefined kind of biological computer, still behind the top electronic versions available in the market, but the restricted prototype is far superior to its inorganic rivals. There are multiple other examples in other areas, from experimental software to enhancement drugs, through biotech and cyber augmentations. The reasons behind this are not only to avoid hypothetically unsafe products from becoming widely available, but also to conceal their origin. However, other gadgets would probably exist without the machinatores interference, such as the organ accumulators, dream machines, aux-sets, and INS translators. Besides that, decades of experimentation in genetics and biotechnology have given rise to a mutated colony that lives on the fringes of society. Even though big corporations deal with their mistakes in a clean way, by eliminating most of their failures, the smaller ones and the underworld's black labs have less rigorous procedures. The darkest places in the underworld's districts, abandoned warehouses, derelict buildings, and sewers house hundreds, perhaps thousands of mutated beings. And you have many different events that can serve as inspiration for your adventures. For example, the technological advances obviously exist, but they are more evident in Avalidad than elsewhere. Or for example, while the city is run mainly by Japanese corporations, that doesn't mean Japan is the world power, as would happen in a 1990s cyberpunk setting. It's just a residual influence from their investment in Avalidad during the 1960s. China is a significant power in this scenario. Biocomputers are slowly replacing the electronic versions. They are not as powerful as quantum computers, but they have the ability to intuit. Biotech augments already exist but are restricted in most countries. Reading books is mostly a thing of the past, but playing games is still much in vogue. Mainly the GamePod, the future of gaming consoles. Movies are nothing more than an art house event for the nostalgic and the cinephiles. And these are just some of the features, events, and characteristics of this campaign setting. And this concludes this part of the review. As you can see, it's a setting that combines many elements from science fiction with a bit of supernatural horror and occultism, and the biotechnology aspect does a great job at knitting things or keeping things glued together. If you want more about this setting, you can also check out my review of a scenario released for this campaign setting by the name of As Above, So Below. So please check that out. We are just getting started with this campaign setting, Postcards from Avalidad. And definitely check out those other role-playing games that can be used with this setting, but like I mentioned, this is system neutral or system universal. You can run it with any setting as long as it's sci-fi and it contains some rules to handle horror and sanity-shattering situations. Thank you for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later.